Well, that was an interesting weekend, wasn't it? I mean, having Ramaphosa address the nation on Sunday, I must admit, whenever he does these national addresses, I do kind of cringe. I already can't be the only one that's just like looks at these things and just thinks to themselves, like, I'm not watching that. But let's talk about it. Let's actually talk about what he talked about and what he thought was important, so much so that he had to bug the rest of us on a Sunday. But before we do, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. So what did Ramaphosa say? Well, he celebrated South Africa's successful G20 presidency. It's a bit like congratulating yourself, because basically it is G20. Anyway, he praised South Africa's warmth, Ubuntu, hospitality, and claimed that business leaders said South Africa had turned the corner. Now, he condemned the US's boycott of the G20 summit under Trump, saying that the reasons were baseless and blatant information. He accused people within South Africa of spreading lies to the US government, causing damage to South Africa's foreign policy, destroying jobs, and undermining the economy. Now, he demanded critics bring concerns to his national dialogue. Remember, this is the same national dialogue being spearheaded by, well, the gift of the givers, and I've done quite a bit on that in the last week. In any case, he said that they should be using that platform instead of the international platforms. Now, if you saw any of the prelude to the national dialogue, you would have noticed how a lot of it seemed to just be an ANC talking shop. ANC wasn't really keen to hear anything that went against the narrative they wanted to push. And I suppose that's the reason many individuals go international. Now, Ramaphosa reinforced that South Africa is a founding G20 member, and he says that America cannot uninvite us. But as I said yesterday, they can just deny you a visa. So you can come all you want, but like you can't force them to let you into their country. Like, why is nobody noticing this? Anyway, what he didn't acknowledge is that the information he's specifically referring to is largely around the narrative of farm murders, expropriation, and minority rights, which he frames as treasonous lies. But here's the problem. Ramaphosa thanked the media for their professionalism. Okay, well, now we've got a problem, because all of a sudden you're thanking every media outlet, News 24, City Press, IOL, EWN, Daily Maverick, Times Live, and so forth and so forth, all of which have had to actually issue formal apologies or retractions for false reporting about AfriForum. So you're thanking them for their professionalism, whilst they accuse AfriForum, the people that you're saying are treasonous, of lying. Can you not see the dilemma here? Now, this was highlighted by the Kifners, who said they lie first, apologize later when caught. And this is true, because the media now in South Africa has turned a corner, and that they are propaganda arms for the state. Now, Ramaphosa praised the media as truth tellers. Why? Because he's repeating the narrative that you yourself want to repeat. That's not a truth teller, that's a propagandist. Now, the media has repeatedly been forced to retract attacks on AfriForum, the very group that they're all saying is spreading lies. Now, this became apparent because News 24 and Times Live both issued pieces, opinion pieces, if you will, directly after Ramaphosa's speech, in which they accused Trump of being a liar, Trump's white genocide narrative as being insane, Trump as an international bully, Trump must stand up to him. I mean, Justice Malala's piece called Trump's claims a tool of war, says that Trump is delusional, and suggests shouting at Trump won't work. South Africa must fix itself first. So it's amazing how the narrative now around the US has just become quite hostile from the media. But what did they ignore? Well, AfriForum did a presentation at the United Nations highlighting farm murders, the Kill the Boer chant, the expropriation laws, and attacks on minority language rights, plus the government scapegoating minorities, all of which were factual, to be honest. Now, the irony is that South Africa says, and the media says, that there are no race laws in South Africa. All this whilst the SHRC, the South African Human Rights Commission itself, is now suggesting expropriating lakeside homes because the area is too white. And so they said that this isn't equity, it's racism, because what they need to do now is basically expropriate these properties so that they can have like equitable representation in the area, like one white home, one Indian home, one black home, like, yeah, no race laws. But this racial equity just seems to march on unabated. Like, who's lying to whom? Now, apparently, as you know, the media then went on repeatedly to say, well, that there are no murders. And then directly under News 24's own article, they had news of a murder in Limpopo. Like, you couldn't make this up. I mean, the optics here are just like retarded. Now, the media and politicians repeatedly claim that farm murders are isolated incidents. There are no genocide, and crimes affect everybody equally. I'm going to say, to a degree, I kind of agree with some of that, and some of it I don't. But you see, the thing that I don't agree with is the brutality in which the cases emerge. I mean, there's crime, and then there's like, what are you guys doing? Now, at the weekend, a 77-year-old Limpopo farmer was tied up, beaten, and then murdered. I mean, you could have just tied him up, stolen stuff out the house, and off you went. Now, the wife was also tied up, beaten, and hospitalized. I mean, what exactly is a 77-year-old going to do? Apparently, the attackers took their guns, phones, and cash. So that was it. You robbed a home for some cash, some phones, and, I don't know, the guy's own personal firearm because he lives on a farm. So does this actual incident prove genocide? Well, the answer is no. But does it prove that the problem is real? Well, yes, and this is the problem. What they're trying to do is they're trying to highlight there is a problem here. And farm murders are becoming worse by the day. And the reason that farm murders are so bad is because they're in rural locations. There is no immediate police. The police sometimes are many miles away, and that's even if they have a working van. Now, Jeff, a YouTuber in the US, actually traveled to South Africa to investigate the genocide claims, and he concluded that farm attacks are real, they're brutal, underreported, and disproportionately targeted at minority commercial farmers. And critics say that, well, Jeff exaggerated. Supporters say that he showed what the South African media refuses to. So which is it? Did he exaggerate, or did he show what nobody else wants to admit? Farm murders are a real issue. And from that, what you can determine is that this might not justify the word genocide. And that's one of the reasons I'm not so keen to use that word, because it means that everybody sits there debating the legality of the word and the meaning of it. And what they are forgetting is that there is a real issue underneath, and that is that violence to farmers is targeted, it is systematic, and it's often underplayed by mainstream media. And you can't deny that. Now, we have to contrast this to something else that's occurring in South Africa, and that is that there is this new Firearms Control Amendment Bill. Now, the bill itself is just balmy, and it's the latest iteration in the government's attempts to constantly strip individuals of their rights of self-defense, because that's effectively what it's doing. It's removing your rights to self-defense. Now, underneath the bill, self-defense will no longer be a justifiable reason to own a firearm and will require extraordinary circumstances for licensing. I mean, we live in one of the most dangerous countries in the world. Is that not enough? It will also cap ammunition to 100 rounds. It will give the minister huge discretionary powers over licenses. Now, remember, government ministers in the ANC's cabinets is not usually the best. I mean, we currently have a whole police capture investigation going on around political killings implicating a serious amount of very senior individuals in government. So why would you give these type of discretionary powers to a government minister when the majority of them are corrupt? In any case, the DA's view on this is that it's the most dangerous attack on citizen safety in the democratic South Africa. Now, according to the DA, the bill is unconstitutional. I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of bored at how many unconstitutional bills there are that the ANC just signs into law. NHI, the Employment Equity Amendment Act, like the ANC just doesn't care about the Constitution as much as they pretend to. Now, the DA's view is that the entire bill was written by unelected bureaucrats who ignore expert evidence. And this is true. Now, the police already can't run the Central Firearms Register, yet they're going to give them more power. I mean, if you've seen any of the pictures of the place, it's a mess. And so what is that expert evidence that they're being accused, the government that is, of ignoring? Well, that's the government's own 2015 Firearms Review, which was done by a university. The government actually commissioned it to see what firearms laws actually do in South Africa. Now, that actual report, when it came out, said that crime in South Africa was actually being driven by SAP's corruption, mismanagement, and guns stolen by police. Because let us not forget that police actually took firearms given in from legal owners during the amnesty and sold them to gangsters in the Cape Flats. I mean, there's whole books written on this. Now, this means that crime itself is not being driven by legal gun owners. So why would you want to strip gun owners of their rights? Now, that same review then noted that actually firearm legislation is not responsible for a reduction in crime. In fact, the actual reduction in crime in South Africa was due to increased policing. Well, who knew? More policing means that you're safer. Has nothing to do with firearms controls. Now, this is ironic because in a state where we currently have police capture as an investigation in Parliament, and it's showing some of the most horrendous cases of capture out since the Zondo Commission, we're now being told that your right to self-defense will be stripped. What's more insidious is that the government will basically say when you can apply self-defense, when you can protect your own life, a basic form of your own dignity, a basic form of your own right to life. And the government is going to be the one who's going to tell you when you can defend your life. I mean, come on, footek. Now, you've got to contrast this bill with some of the crime data. South Africa ranks the second worst country on this continent in Africa, a continent plagued by civil wars and mass killings everywhere. I mean, just look at the DRC. So what is it that we're the second worst for? Well, organized criminality, because in South Africa, we have no rule of law and you can just get on with whatever you want. Our crime zones are worse than several war zones. Our violent crime rises constantly and state resilience to crime is failing completely. I mean, just look at 2021. 2021 was the blueprints of exactly why the government should not be trusted with your ability to protect yourself. Like, police capacity is collapsing. This is after many police officers just completely leave the profession because it's a giant shit show. Now, what happens when the state can't protect its citizens and gangs are armed with police-issued weapons? When rural communities are being left alone and farm murders do occur? Yeah, disarming the law-abiding individual is just dumb. The data doesn't support that this should be done. It's irrational, it's dangerous. And yet the government thinks that this is a good idea. And this tells you everything you need to know about the government's priorities. Now onto some very minor stories before we end for today. Now, this is the first, which is the catch-up of the story from last week around the Russian soldiers. Now remember, this is the 17 South African soldiers who have flown to Russia under false pretenses. Now, those individuals were told that they would be trained as MK Party bodyguards and basically sold to the Russian government, where they were sent to Donetsk on the front lines. Now, the families involved allege that the involvement of Dudazila Zuma is really the problem here. They say that she's the one who was engaged in human trafficking, and Parliament has now filed a complaint against her. Jacob Zuma even wrote to Russia's defense minister asking for those individuals' release, and Dudazila has now resigned from Parliament. So you've got to look at that and see our own state weaknesses, where our own political parties, our own politicians are engaged in political criminality, which then ultimately sucks South Africans into. And you've got to contrast that to some of the moves that the government is making and just think like, the government here is criminal, but let's just remove your rights to self-defense. It's beyond a joke, to be frank. And I suspect it will be a red line for many. Now, onto another story, and this is around the Gazan refugees. Now, if you watch my videos on that, you will recall that there were some Palestinian refugees that came through to South Africa. There were over 150, And they've been housed by the gift of the givers. They were reportedly to have paid $1,500 for their trip. And ultimately, it turned out that this was not the first flight to send refugees here. Now, you will recall from my videos itself, there had been 2 flights that had come here before, and it was suggested that more flights would be on their way. Now, South Africa keeps presenting itself as a champion of the Palestinians, and this is why so many of them now say that they want to come through to South Africa, a country that's so positive towards them. In fact, you can actually see protests that occurred at the weekend in Cape Town, all for the support of the Palestinians. In fact, have a watch. Now, all this at a time when the state itself is just completely overwhelmed with its own issues. And so you have to look at this entire debacle and say, well, what's the South African government going to do about it? Well, the news out is that they don't want any more of these flights. So whilst they've taken in a few and they've been done by third parties, their government says that they're underprepared for them and that they can't actually take more of these individuals. So they're shutting the airspace to future Gazan flights. They have to contrast this with their own political theater around how much they love the Palestinians. But domestic capacity doesn't match it because we cannot take on other people's problems. So one of the things that I myself would like to end off in notes and say, how many of you actually know what the Palestinian flag means? And this may seem like an irrelevant point, but when you see that flag flown so repeatedly in South Africa, the actual reason or the meaning of the flag becomes apparent. Now, the flag itself actually originated from the Arab Revolt of 1916, and it was designed during World War I for an uprising against the Ottoman empires. Now, the colors were based on a pan-Arab colors. That's black, white, green, and red, symbolizing major Arab dynasties. Yep, Arab dynasties. Now, after the revolt was adopted by the Palestinian nationalists, yes, Palestinian nationalists in 1920, and it was later formalized by the Palestinian Authority in 1964, and it was affirmed as their flag by 1988. Now, interestingly enough, the colors themselves are actually meant to symbolize Arab unity. They represent the Palestinian nationalism and identity. So we've got a nationalistic flag for Arab supremacy. The whole flag became a unifying nationalist symbol during the British Mandate, and by the 1960s, liberation movements, especially the First Intifada, displayed the actual flag as an emblem of defiance, self-determination, and national sovereignty. So yes, we're flying an Arab supremacist flag constantly in Cape Town, as if somehow it's part of our national identity in South Africa. It's not. It's a flag for a nationalist movement abroad. It is not a flag of peace, love, and harmony, meant to be a flag of power, symbolizing defiance. It's symbolizing Arab supremacy. Why is it nobody else notices this? Let me know what you think of that in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.